I've been driving trucks for nearly 25 years, and I thought I'd seen it all. Flat tires in the middle of nowhere, engine troubles on lonely highways, bad weather that made me question my sanity. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened one night during a routine delivery from Texas to California. It was supposed to be just another long haul. The route was familiar. I knew every rest stop, every diner, and every gas station along the way. It wasn't fancy work, but it covered the expenses, and I liked the solitude of the road. This time, though, something felt strange. Not right away. Everything started normally enough. The sun dipped behind me as I crossed into New Mexico. By midnight, the sky had turned pitch black and clouds were rolling in. Initially, it was just drizzle, then heavy rain, and finally a full-blown storm. My windshield wipers worked overtime, struggling to keep up with the sheets of water pouring down. Visibility dropped to almost zero, and I slowed my rig to a crawl. That's when I noticed a pair of headlights far back in my rearview mirror. At first glance, they didn't seem unusual. Trucks and cars passed me all the time on these routes, but something about those headlights caught my attention. They weren't moving like normal traffic. Instead of overtaking me or keeping a steady pace, they stayed exactly where they were, just close enough to stay visible in my mirrors. Maybe they're stuck behind me because of the storm, I told myself, trying to shake off the unease creeping into my chest. In my line of work, you learn to trust your instincts, and mine were screaming at me to get out of there. I scanned the roadside for a place to pull over. A sign flashed by, next rest area, 10 miles. 10 miles might as well have been 100 in this weather. Still, it gave me hope. I kept my speed steady, glancing at my mirrors every few seconds. Those headlights never wavered. They stayed glued to my tail. As the miles dragged on, the tension inside the cab grew unbearable. Every flash of lightning illuminated the dark road ahead, and each clap of thunder rattled the truck like a cheap tin can. Then the headlights vanished. 1 second they were there, hovering menacingly behind me, and the next, gone. Had they turned off somewhere? Past me while I wasn't looking? Or worse, were they still there, lurking unseen in the shadows? I couldn't tell. The rain was too thick, the night too dark. All I could do was grip the wheel tighter and pray I'd reach the rest area soon. Finally, after what felt like hours, I spotted the glowing sign for the rest stop through the haze. Relieved as I pulled onto the exit ramp. The parking lot was mostly empty, save for a couple of rigs parked near the building. I chose a spot near the edge of the lot, far from the others, and killed the engine. For a moment, I sat there, listening to the rain hammer against the roof. Then, grabbing my flashlight, I cracked open the door and leaned out, scanning the area. Nothing. No car, no headlights, no sign of whoever had been following me, just the storm raging around me. I locked the doors, grabbed my blanket, and tried to settle in for some sleep. The rhythmic patter of rain should have been soothing, but my mind wouldn't quiet down. Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by flashes of lightning and the occasional rumble of thunder. When I woke up, it wasn't because of the storm. It was the sound of footsteps splashing through puddles outside. My eyes snapped open, and I froze, straining to listen. I could hear careful steps circling the truck. Whoever it was, they weren't trying to hide. Panicked, I reached under my seat for the tire iron I kept there, clutching it tightly as I debated my next move. Should I confront them? Call the police, or just stay quiet and hope they went away? Before I could decide, the passenger side door creaked open. Adrenaline shot through my veins as I swung the tire iron toward the intruder. "Get out of my truck!" I shouted, my voice trembling. But in a second, no one was there. The door hung open, swaying slightly in the wind. Confused, I climbed across the seat to shut it, peering out into the rain-soaked darkness. Still nothing. That's when I heard it, the unmistakable rev of an engine. Spinning around, I saw a dark sedan speeding out of the parking lot, its taillights disappearing into the storm. I scrambled to grab my phone and dialed 911, reporting everything I'd seen. The cops arrived within minutes. They searched the area but found no trace of the car. Whoever they were long gone. I don't know who they were or what they wanted. Maybe they were planning to rob me, maybe vandalize the truck, or maybe they just got spooked and fled. Whatever their intentions, I count myself lucky to have escaped unharmed. Driving is my life, and I'll never stop loving the freedom of the open road. But since that night, I've learned to trust my gut even more than before. It was a Friday evening, the kind where you feel both exhausted and restless after a long week of college classes. I had finished my last lecture for the day and decided to spend the night doing DoorDash. This wasn't just some random gig, it was my routine on weekends. Dashing helped me cover my living expenses while I juggled schoolwork. A steady stream of orders, decent tips, and enough money coming in to make it worthwhile. That night after the dinner rush, things slowed down dramatically. Orders trickled in, but they were all low-paying ones, those annoying deliveries that barely covered gas, let alone time. So I drove around aimlessly, hoping something better would pop up. An hour passed with nothing promising until finally an order came through. It wasn't anything crazy, but it paid decently. 8 miles away, not too far, not too close. I accepted the order without hesitation. The restaurant was nearby, so I grabbed the bag quickly and hit the road. According to the app, the delivery address was about 30 minutes out. That felt unusual because most places I delivered to were within 15 or 20 minutes from campus. Anything farther than that typically meant venturing into rural areas, empty roads lined with fields of crops and scattered houses. As I drove, the scenery changed. There were small clusters of homes, then fewer and fewer as the distance grew. By the time I reached the 20-minute mark, the landscape turned eerily empty. Fields stretched endlessly on either side of the road, broken only by the occasional barn or silo. My GPS led me off the main highway onto a narrow dirt path winding through one of these vast fields. In the distance, I could see a tiny house sitting alone at the end of the driveway. The drive down the dirt path felt strange. The car's tires crunched against the gravel, creating a sound that seemed unnaturally loud in the silence of the night. There were no streetlights here, just the faint glow of my headlights cutting through the darkness. As I approached the house, I noticed how isolated it was. The field surrounded it completely, making it feel cut off from the rest of the world. I parked near the porch, grabbed the food bag, and left the engine running. Stepping out of the car, I realized how quiet everything was. The only light came from a single bulb hanging above the porch. It cast a dim glow over the weathered wooden boards beneath my feet. The house itself looked old and neglected. I knocked on the door, waiting for someone to answer. When no one came, I knocked again, louder. Still nothing. Not even the faintest sound of movement inside. Something about the situation didn't sit right with me. Up close, the house appeared abandoned. Weeds sprouted wildly around the foundation, and the front steps sagged under their own weight. But if the place was empty, why did someone order food? And why was the porch light on? Then it hit me, the light. It wasn't wired to the house. It was one of those cheap, solar-powered fixtures. It charged during the day and turned on automatically at night. That explained the light, but it also confirmed what I already suspected. Nobody lived here. Before I could process this fully, I heard the rumble of another engine behind me. Turning, I saw headlights approaching fast. A car pulled up directly behind mine, blocking my exit. Who was this? Why were they here? The driver stepped out slowly. He stood next to his vehicle, staring at me silently. His face was shadowy in the dim light, but I could tell he wasn't moving toward the house. Instead, he lingered by his car, watching me. I called out from the porch, "Is this your order?" My voice trembled despite my best effort to stay calm. He didn't respond. He didn't move. He just stood there, motionless. Terrified me. I glanced back at my car, realizing how trapped I was. Between me and safety lay an open field, an abandoned house, and now this stranger. Instinct kicked in. Without thinking, I dropped the food bag and bolted off the porch, running straight into the field behind the house. The grass swallowed me whole. It was taller than I expected, brushing against my chest as I sprinted blindly. Behind me, I heard footsteps chasing after me. Adrenaline surged through my veins, pushing me faster. The further I ran, the denser the vegetation became, slowing me down but also making it harder for him to follow. Finally, I stopped to catch my breath, crouching low in the grass. I listened carefully, trying to gauge whether he was still pursuing me. Silence. For a moment, I allowed myself to hope he'd given up. Slowly, I began navigating through the field, keeping as quiet as possible. every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves convinced he was lurking nearby. Eventually, I stumbled upon another property, a farmhouse surrounded by a fence. From there, I found my way to a paved road. I felt relieved when I saw the bars on my phone rise, indicating signal. I dialed 911 immediately, explaining my situation in shaky sentences. The operator assured me help was on the way. When the police arrived, they escorted me back to the scene. To my surprise, the man was gone. My car sat untouched, keys still in the ignition, and the food bag remained on the porch where I'd left it. Everything seemed exactly as I'd left it, except for the absence of danger. Later, the officers told me they'd checked the surrounding area, but found no trace of the man or his vehicle. They suggested I might have interrupted a burglary attempt or encountered someone casing the property. Either way, they warned me to be more cautious about accepting deliveries to remote locations. Driving home that night, I couldn't shake the sense of unease. What had really happened out there? Was he planning to rob me? Or was it something worse? All I knew for sure was that I wouldn't forget that night anytime soon, and I'd think twice before heading down another lonely dirt road. It was the summer before my 19th birthday, and I had just finished packing up everything I owned into my old beat-up sedan. My parents helped me load it all in, boxes of clothes, textbooks, a few posters for my dorm room, but now it was time for me to leave. I'd never been away from home for more than a weekend. This road trip felt like exploring unfamiliar ground. The drive from my small town to college was over 600 miles, and I decided to split it into 2 days because driving that far alone seemed impossible. Initially, I stuck to the highways, listened to music, and stopped at gas stations whenever I needed breaks. By evening, I checked into a motel, ate some fast food, and crashed early. But the second day, that's where things got weird. I woke up around 7 a.m., grabbed breakfast from a nearby diner, and hit the road again. Everything started normally. Clear skies, light traffic. Around mid-afternoon, though, the landscape began to change. The highway narrowed, the towns grew smaller, and eventually, there were no towns at all. Just miles of empty fields stretching as far as I could see. It wasn't scary exactly, but it made me feel exposed. Like if something went wrong out here, nobody would find me for hours. By late afternoon, the sun dipped lower in the sky, spreading long shadows over the road. I kept glancing at my phone, checking the map app to make sure I was still on track. According to it, I had about 3 more hours until I reached the hotel where I planned to spend the night. Traffic thinned out completely, and soon the only company I had was the steady hum of my engine and few birds flying overhead. As the sun disappeared behind the horizon, the darkness crept in faster than I expected. There were no streetlights along this stretch of road, and the headlights of other cars became rarer too. At one point, I realized I hadn't seen another vehicle for nearly 20 minutes. A strange kind of loneliness settled over me, making every bump in the road sound louder, every flicker of movement outside seem more significant. Around 9 p.m., I noticed a sign for a gas station coming up ahead. My tank was getting low, and I figured it wouldn't hurt to fill up while grabbing a snack. When I pulled off the highway, the exit led to what looked like the middle of nowhere. There was nothing around except an old gas station with 2 pumps and a tiny convenience store attached to it. No cars parked anywhere, no houses or buildings visible in any direction, just silence. I parked right next to one of the pumps and stepped out of the car. The air was cool, almost eerily still. As I started pumping gas, I heard footsteps behind me. Turning quickly, I saw a man walking toward me. He looked older, maybe in his late 50s, with scruffy hair. His face was weathered, and he carried a backpack slung over one shoulder. "Hey," he said, stopping a few feet away. His voice was calm but firm. "You need to turn back." "What?" I asked, confused. "Turn back where?" "To the highway," he replied, pointing toward the exit ramp I'd come from. "Don't take the main entrance. Go back the way you came." I frowned. "Why? Is there construction or something?" He shook his head. "Just trust me. Don't go that way." Something about him didn't sit right with me. Maybe it was the way he avoided eye contact or how he kept glancing nervously over his shoulder. Or maybe it was the fact that we were standing in the middle of nowhere and he was telling me not to follow the perfectly normal-looking road ahead. "I'll be fine," I said, trying to sound confident. "Thanks anyway." The man hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Suit yourself." With that, he turned and walked toward the convenience store, disappearing inside. I finished filling my tank, grabbed a bottle of water from the store, avoiding the guy entirely, and got back in my car. As I drove toward the entrance ramp, I couldn't ignore the sense that I was being watched. Glancing in my rearview mirror, I thought I saw someone standing near the edge of the lot, watching me leave. Was it the same guy? Hard to tell in the dim light. The ramp curved gently upward, leading back onto the highway. As I merged, I immediately noticed something strange. All the streetlights were out. The road stretched ahead of me, pitch black except for the faint glow of my headlights. What had the guy meant when he told me not to come this way? Was this some kind of trap? I slowed down, scanning the sides of the road for anything unusual. Then out of nowhere, I saw a man dart across the pavement. It happened so fast I almost doubted it. A person running into the darkness. Before I could process what I'd seen, a pair of bright headlights appeared directly in front of me. A pickup truck screeched to a halt, blocking both lanes. 4 men jumped out, each holding something: a baseball bat, a crowbar, a knife. They didn't wear masks or try to hide their faces. Instead, they stared at me with blank expressions, like they were following orders rather than acting on impulse. I threw my car into reverse and floored it, backing up as fast as I dared. The men ran after me, shouting words I couldn't understand. One of them swung his bat at my window, cracking the glass. I swerved wildly, trying to put distance between us. That's when I saw them, the others. Dozens of people emerged from the shadows lining the road. Some held weapons, others simply stood there watching. It was like they'd been waiting for this, hiding in plain sight. I slammed my foot on the gas pedal, spinning the car around and speeding back the way I'd come. I didn't stop until I reached the gas station, which thankfully was still empty. I locked the doors and called 911, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. The operator promised to send help, but deep down, I knew I couldn't rely on anyone else. After a few tense minutes, I forced myself to keep driving, taking a different route entirely. Hours later, I finally arrived at the hotel, exhausted and shaken. I never did hear back from the police about what happened, and honestly, I'm not sure I want to know. All I know is that creepy guy at the gas station saved my life. Whatever those people were planning, whatever they wanted, I escaped just in time, and I've never taken a shortcut since. I've been driving for Uber and Lyft on weekends for about 3 years now. It's not my full-time job. I work as a mechanic during the week, but it helps pay the bills, and I enjoy meeting new people. Most of my rides are pretty uneventful. College kids heading to parties, families needing a ride home from the airport, or someone too tired to drive after a long day at work. I'm not much of a talker, so I usually keep things short and sweet. A quick hello when they get in, maybe a polite comment about the weather if I feel like it, and that's it. Small talk isn't really my thing. Over time, I've gotten used to the rhythm of late-night driving, even though some parts of town can get sketchy after midnight. One Saturday night, I started my shift around 9 p.m., picking up passengers here and there without any issues. By 11:30, I'd already driven about 8 people to their destinations. A group of friends going to a bar, a couple returning from dinner, nothing out of the ordinary. Then came a request that seemed normal at first glance, but ended up being one of the most nerve-wracking experiences of my life. The pickup location was listed as a dimly lit street corner near an industrial area. Not the safest neighborhood, but I figured it wouldn't be a problem since I'd drop them off quickly and move on. When I arrived, I didn't see anyone waiting. The app said the passenger was nearby, so I parked along the curb and waited, scanning the shadows for movement. After a minute or two, I decided to call the number associated with the account. It rang twice before someone picked up, but instead of speaking, all I heard was heavy breathing. Before I could say anything, the line went dead. Weird, I thought, but not unheard of. Sometimes people accidentally hit the wrong button or lose service. Just as I was about to cancel the trip, the back door opened, and a man slid into the seat behind me. He wore a hoodie pulled low over his face, and his hands were shoved deep into his pockets. "Are you James?" I asked, glancing at him briefly through the rearview mirror. "Yes," he muttered quietly, barely audible over the hum of the engine. I nodded, shifted into drive, and headed toward his destination, a residential area about 20 minutes away. The first few minutes passed in silence, which wasn't unusual. But as we drove, something about the situation started to feel off. Every time I checked the mirror, the guy was staring intently at the floor, fidgeting with his fingers. His posture was tense, like he was bracing himself for something. Normally, I wouldn't think twice about it. People have bad days, right? But combined with the strange phone call earlier, it made me uneasy. About 10 minutes in, he finally spoke. "How far are we?" His voice was shaky, almost nervous. "About 10 more minutes." I replied, keeping my tone neutral. He leaned forward slightly, peering between the front seats. "Is everything okay, sir?" I glanced at him in the mirror again. "Yeah, why wouldn't it be?" He hesitated, then leaned back, muttering, "No reason." That's when my gut told me something was seriously wrong. I slowed down slightly, keeping one eye on the road and the other on the mirror. Was he reaching for something? Did he have a weapon hidden under his hoodie? My mind raced through every worst-case scenario: carjacking, robbery, assault. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, trying to stay calm. We were about 5 minutes from his destination when he suddenly leaned forward again. "Can you pull over here? Just drop me off right here." I frowned, looking around. The road was deserted. No streetlights, no houses, no cars in sight. This wasn't a safe place to stop, especially at night. "Are you sure? Your address is just a few minutes away," I said, hoping he'd let me continue driving. "No, pull over now," he insisted, his voice firmer this time. Reluctantly, I eased the car onto the shoulder, leaving it in drive with my foot hovering over the brake pedal. "All right, have a good night," I said, trying to sound casual while mentally preparing for whatever might happen next. But he didn't get out. Instead, he sat there, frozen, as if debating his next move. For a few seconds, the only sound was the soft hum of the engine and the occasional rustle of leaves outside. Then, without warning, he lunged forward, grabbing for my phone mounted on the dashboard. Instinct kicked in. I slammed my elbow backward, knocking his hand away. The phone clattered to the floor, and chaos erupted. He scrambled to reach it, his arms flailing wildly as he tried to climb over the center console. The car jerked forward as my foot slipped off the brake, but I managed to regain control, stomping hard on the pedal to keep us from crashing. Adrenaline surged through me as I fought to keep him away. I twisted in my seat, shoving him back with both hands. He was surprisingly strong, but his movements were frantic and uncoordinated, like he wasn't entirely sure what he was doing. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 20 seconds, he gave up, yanked open the door, and bolted into the darkness. Shaking and gasping for air, I sped off immediately, putting as much distance between me and that spot as possible. Once I was far enough away, I pulled over and called 911. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold the phone steady, but I managed to explain what had happened. The dispatcher assured me they'd send officers to investigate. Later that night, I learned the guy had been using a stolen Uber account. Police tracked him down within hours, thanks to the GPS data from my app. Apparently, he had a history of petty crimes, but nothing violent. Still, it didn't make me feel any better about what had happened. Since that night, I've changed how I approach certain situations. If a pickup looks suspicious or feels unsafe, I'll cancel the ride, even if it means losing money. I also upgraded my dashcam system to record both inside and outside the car. You never know when you'll need evidence. Driving for rideshare services has taught me a lot about human nature. Most people are decent, honest folks just looking for a convenient ride. But every once in a while, you encounter someone who reminds you how unpredictable and sometimes dangerous the world can be. That experience will stick with me forever, not because of the fear it caused, but because of the lessons it taught me about staying vigilant and trusting my instincts. I've been driving trucks for over 15 years now, and most of that time has been spent hauling freight across the country. A few years back, I started working for a moving company that specializes in long-distance relocations. My job is pretty straightforward. Load up the truck with furniture and boxes at one end, drive it to the other side of the map, then unload everything with help from a local team. It's not glamorous work, but it pays well enough to keep food on the table. One particular trip stands out in my mind because it was unlike any other delivery I'd done before or since. The move was from central Arkansas to northern Minnesota, which meant about 16 hours of driving through some of the flattest, emptiest stretches of highway you could imagine. We loaded up early in the morning, boxes stacked high, furniture strapped down tight, and by noon, I hit the road. The first leg of the journey was smooth sailing. I drove for 6 hours straight, stopping only once for gas and a quick bite to eat. By the time evening rolled around, I was deep into Illinois, cruising along a quiet 2-lane highway surrounded by nothing but fields of corn and soybeans as far as the eye could see. The sun dipped below the horizon, leaving me alone with the hum of the engine and the occasional flash of headlights from passing cars. Around 9 p.m., something strange caught my attention up ahead. In the distance, I saw blinking hazard lights reflecting off the pavement. At first glance, it looked like a car had broken down right in the middle of the road. As I got closer, though, I realized something wasn't quite right. The car wasn't facing forward. It was parked sideways, completely blocking both lanes. Its hazard lights were flashing brightly, making it impossible to miss. Then I noticed another vehicle. About 20 feet behind the first car, there was a second one, parked nose to nose with it. Unlike the first, this one had no lights on at all. Together they formed an impenetrable barrier across the entire width of the road. There was no way around them unless I wanted to drive into a ditch or turn the truck around, which wasn't really an option given how narrow the highway was. My heart sank as I slowed down, pulling my semi to a stop about 30 feet away. I left the engine running and scanned the area, looking for signs of life. No tow truck, no emergency vehicles, nobody standing near the cars, just silence. And that made me nervous. You hear stories about things like this happening, roadblocks set up by criminals looking to rob unsuspecting drivers. Most of the time, those stories feel exaggerated, like urban legends meant to scare people. But sitting there in the dark, staring at those two cars, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I reached into the center console and pulled out the small handgun I kept for emergencies. I'd never had to use it before, but having it close gave me a sliver of comfort. Still, I knew if whoever was behind this setup decided to attack, I'd be outnumbered and outgunned. So I sat there, gripping the steering wheel with one hand and the pistol with the other, waiting for something, anything, to happen. Minutes ticked by, but nothing moved. No voices, no footsteps, no sound except the faint whistle of wind blowing across the plains. Finally, after what felt like forever, I decided I needed to figure out what was going on. Staying put wasn't doing me any favors, and turning around would mean losing hours of progress, and possibly putting myself in even more danger. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door and stepped out onto the asphalt. The cool night air hit me immediately, sending a shiver down my spine. I stayed close to the truck, keeping one hand on the doorframe, just in case I needed to dive back inside quickly. For a full minute, I stood there, scanning the darkness, listening intently for any sign of movement. When nothing happened, I forced myself to take a step forward, then another. Slowly, I approached the car with the hazard lights on. Peering through the windows, I saw nothing unusual inside. It was clean, almost too clean, like someone had taken care to make sure it looked normal. I tried the door handle. It was unlocked. That struck me as odd. Who leaves their car unlocked in the middle of nowhere? Curious, I leaned in and checked the gear shift. Neutral. Whoever had parked it here hadn't just abandoned it. They'd deliberately left it in a position where it wouldn't roll away. This wasn't an accident. Someone had planned this. I glanced toward the field next to the road. It was flat and open, stretching endlessly into the darkness. If anyone was hiding nearby, they were doing a damn good job of staying out of sight. With no other options, I decided to push the car out of the way. It was risky, but sitting there indefinitely felt even worse. Gripping the bumper, I braced myself and began pushing. To my surprise, the car moved easily, rolling smoothly off the road until it came to rest in the grass. Now there was just enough space between the two vehicles for my truck to squeeze through. Feeling a mix of relief and unease, I turned to head back to the cab. But before I could take more than a few steps, I heard it. A shout, loud and sharp, cutting through the stillness of the night. I froze, my blood running cold. Turning slowly, I squinted into the darkness and saw a figure sprinting toward me from farther down the road. Behind him, two more shapes emerged, running fast and holding something in their hands. Weapons? Tools? I didn't wait to find out. Dropping everything, I bolted for the truck, scrambling inside and slamming the door shut behind me. My hands trembled as I shifted into gear and eased the massive rig forward. The figures were closing in fast, shouting angrily as they waved whatever they were carrying above their heads. I lined the truck up carefully, aiming for the gap I'd created, and floored it. As the truck rumbled past the blockade, I ducked low in my seat, half expecting to hear the crack of gunfire, but nothing came. When I finally glanced up in my rearview mirror, the men were standing near the cars, watching me disappear into the night. They didn't follow. For the next hour, I drove faster than I should have, constantly checking my mirrors for tailgaters. Only when I reached a small town did I pull over to catch my breath and call the police. By then, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial the number. I explained what had happened, describing the scene as best I could, but admitted I had no idea whether it was a trap or something else entirely. The officer I spoke to promised to send a patrol unit to investigate, but deep down, I doubted they'd find anything useful. Whether those guys were planning to rob me, kidnap me, or something worse, they were long gone by the time anyone arrived. Since then, I've become even more cautious on the road. Late-night drives through desolate areas are always nerve-wracking, but now I double-check every detail, trust my instincts, and keep my phone charged just in case. You can't prepare for everything, but sometimes being alert is the difference between getting home safely and becoming part of a story you'll never get to tell. I've been babysitting for the Thompson family for about 2 years now. They're a wonderful family. 2 sweet kids, Ella and Liam, and their mom, Sarah, who runs her own boutique marketing firm. She works long hours, so she relies on me to help take care of the kids after school and during events like sports practices or school plays. I love working with them. They feel more like family than clients. One Friday evening, the kids had a small play at their elementary school. It was supposed to be a fun night, but Sarah couldn't attend because of an important client meeting. So naturally, I stepped in as their stand-in mom for the evening. The play ended around 7 p.m., and we needed to hurry home so the kids could eat dinner and get ready for bed. They both had early morning swim practice the next day. The Thompsons live in a quiet, secluded neighborhood on the outskirts of town. Their house is surrounded by trees, and the roads leading to it are narrow, winding, and barely lit. There aren't many houses nearby, which makes it peaceful, but also a little eerie when you're driving through alone at night. On this particular night, the sky was pitch black, and the only light came from my car's headlights. After getting the kids settled into the back seat, I started the drive home. Everything seemed normal at first. The kids were chatting excitedly about their performance, and I was focused on navigating the dark, twisty road ahead. But about halfway there, I noticed something strange. A pair of headlights appeared behind us, moving closer faster than I expected. At first, I thought nothing of it. Maybe it was one of the neighbors heading home. But then the car got uncomfortably close, practically tailgating me. I slowed down slightly, hoping they'd pass, but instead, they turned on their high beams. The sudden brightness flooded my rearview mirror, making it hard to see anything clearly. My heart began to race. The speed limit on this road was only 15 miles per hour, and speeding up wasn't safe, not with the sharp curves and lack of visibility. Instead, I decided to pull over onto the shoulder to let them go around. As soon as I did, though, they pulled over too, stopping just a few feet behind me. My stomach dropped. Panic set in, but I tried to stay calm. Maybe they need directions, I told myself. Or maybe my taillight was out, and they were trying to warn me. Whatever the reason, I wasn't taking any chances. I locked all the doors and rolled down my window just a crack, keeping one hand on the gear shift in case I needed to move quickly. A man stepped out of the car and approached mine. He looked ordinary enough, middle-aged, wearing jeans and a hoodie, but his presence made my skin crawl. He smiled as he leaned toward my window. "Hey, do you know if address is down this road?" he asked casually. I didn't recognize the address, so I shook my head. "Sorry, I don't think so." But as he spoke, I noticed his eyes kept darting to the back seat, where Ella and Liam sat quietly watching him. That's when the unease really hit me. Why was he asking me, and why was he staring at the kids? "I'm sorry, I really have to get going," I said firmly, trying to mask the tremor in my voice. Before he could respond, I gently pressed the gas pedal, easing the car forward. But before I could fully pull away, he reached out and grabbed the door handle, tugging at it. When it didn't budge, he slammed his fist against the trunk and shouted something unintelligible as I drove off. The kids immediately started asking questions, their voices tinged with fear. "What's wrong? Who was that man?" I forced a smile and reassured them everything was fine, even though my hands were shaking on the wheel. As soon as I found a stretch of road wide enough to stop briefly, I called 911. While I explained what had happened to the operator, I glanced in my rearview mirror and saw those same headlights again. This time, the driver was honking aggressively, flashing their lights and tailgating me dangerously close. The operator stayed on the line, telling me to keep driving steadily and avoid braking suddenly. My mind raced. If I led them straight to the Thompsons' house, I'd be putting the entire family in danger. We were almost to the first house on our street, so I prayed silently that someone would be home. As we approached, I started honking wildly, hoping to draw attention. Miraculously, a light flickered on inside the house, and an older couple peeked out their window. I turned sharply into their driveway, screeching to a stop. The car behind us hesitated, slowing down before pulling away. The couple rushed outside, looking alarmed. I quickly explained the situation, and they ushered us inside while calling the police themselves. Within minutes, sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as patrol cars arrived. The officers took my statement and escorted me and the kids back to the Thompsons' house, ensuring we weren't followed. By the time we got there, Sarah had returned from her meeting. Her face fell when I described the man to her. She stood frozen for a moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she whispered, "That's my ex-husband." I felt a chill run down my spine. Sarah explained that several years ago, she had obtained a restraining order against him after multiple attempts to abduct the children. Apparently, this wasn't the first time he'd tried something like this, but she hadn't anticipated him finding them here. Thankfully, the police managed to locate him later that night. He was arrested and charged with violating the restraining order, stalking, and reckless driving. Knowing he was off the streets brought some peace of mind, but the experience left a lasting impact on all of us. Since then, I've become much more vigilant when driving, especially at night. I always check my surroundings, keep my phone charged, and trust my instincts if something feels off. Working for the Thompsons has taught me a lot about responsibility, but that night reminded me how unpredictable life can be and how important it is to protect those you care about, no matter what. I got off work at 11 p.m. and started driving home. It's about a 45-minute drive because I live far outside the city. The roads are usually quiet and empty at night, which I like. It helps me relax after a long day. That night, though, something felt strange. The road was foggy and everything looked blurry. About 20 minutes from home, I turned onto a side road that goes through thick woods. I've driven this road for years, but it always feels a little creepy at night. A few minutes in, I saw a blinking light ahead. I couldn't tell where it was coming from or how far away it was. As I got closer, the light suddenly turned off. Then, out of nowhere, a car pulled out from the side of the road and stopped right in front of me. I hit the brakes, but I was too close. My car gently bumped into theirs. I was shocked. But when I checked, there wasn't much damage, just a small scratch. I got out of my car to see what happened. Their car looked old and beat up, and its headlights were off, which seemed weird. Inside, I could see someone moving around, but no one came out right away. Finally, the driver stepped out. He was tall and big, wearing a heavy coat. His face was partly hidden under a hat, and he kept looking around instead of looking at me. Something about him made me uneasy. "Are you okay?" I asked. "You pulled out pretty fast." "Yeah, sorry," he muttered. His voice sounded rough. I nodded. No problem. There's no real damage. I'll just head home. But as I reached for my car door, he said, "Wait, what is it?" I asked. "I want to check my car," he said, walking to the back bumper. "Okay," I replied, staying near my car. But then he started walking all around his car, pretending to look for damage. We barely even bumped. That's when I noticed a shadow moving in the back seat. Someone else was in the car. Before I could think, the passenger door opened and another man got out. He was even bigger than the first guy. He didn't say anything, just stood there, staring at me. My heart started racing. Both men were now between me and my car. Without thinking, I backed up toward my door, unlocked it, and jumped inside. I locked the doors just as they began walking toward me. The first man pounded on my window, yelling something I couldn't hear. The second man moved to block my way. Panicking, I threw the car into gear, reversed quickly, and sped around them. In my rearview mirror, I saw their car turn on its lights and start following me. For a short time, they stayed behind me, but eventually, their lights disappeared into the fog. I didn't stop until I reached a gas station 5 minutes from my house. I parked under a bright light and waited to see if they'd show up again. After 15 minutes, no one came, so I drove home. Once I was safe, I thought about calling the police, but I wasn't sure if I was overreacting. Still, the whole thing felt wrong. Who were those men? What did they want? Were they trying to rob me, hurt me, or worse? Now, whenever I think about that road, I feel uneasy. I wonder if I got away because I acted fast, or if they let me go. Either way, I can't stop wondering if they're still out there, waiting for someone else to come along. Last summer, I decided to go to a big music festival on the outskirts of Detroit. It was my first time going, and honestly, I wasn't sure what to expect. The tickets were super cheap, way cheaper than usual, and that should have been a red flag right there. But my friends convinced me it'd be fun, so we went for it. The venue was in an industrial part of town, surrounded by old warehouses and cracked pavement. You could tell just by looking around that this place didn't get much foot traffic during the day, let alone at night. Still, once the music started, everything felt fine. Thousands of people were there, dancing and singing along. For those few hours, I forgot about where we were and just enjoyed myself. By the end of the night, though, reality came crashing back. We left the festival around midnight, expecting to hop onto the highway quickly. Problem was, everyone else had the same idea. Cars stretched out as far as you could see, bumper to bumper, with no movement whatsoever. My buddy Chris pulled up Google Maps on his phone and found an alternate route through some side streets. "It's longer," he said, "but it'll save us like 45 minutes. We all agreed it was worth a shot. After sitting in traffic for nearly half an hour without moving more than 10 feet, anything sounded better. So we turned off the main road and started winding our way through residential neighborhoods. It seemed okay. The streets were quiet, and the houses looked abandoned or run down. There weren't any street lights, but the moon gave enough light to make things feel eerie rather than pitch black. Then something caught my attention. People. Not a ton, but enough to notice. Some were standing on their porches, others leaned against rusted cars parked on the curb. A couple walked down the middle of the street like they owned it. This late at night? In a neighborhood like this? Something felt strange. "Hey," Sarah whispered from the passenger seat. "Does anyone else think it's weird how many people are outside?" Before anyone could answer, we passed a group of guys loitering near a corner store. They stared hard at our car as we drove by, not even pretending to look away. One of them pointed at us, and another laughed. As we kept driving, the streets got quieter. Too quiet. That's when we realized we hadn't seen another car in ages. Just ours. Alone. On these narrow, shadowy roads. Every intersection felt like a gamble. Should we turn left? Right? Keep straight? No one knew. Chris checked the map again. "Okay, according to this, if we stay on this road, we'll hit a bigger street in about 5 minutes. From there, we can get to the highway." 5 minutes felt like forever given how tense we all were. Then, disaster struck. Up ahead, blocking both lanes, was a beat-up van parked sideways across the road. Its headlights were off, and it looked completely empty. I slammed on the brakes. "What do we do now?" No one spoke. Finally, Jake, who was sitting behind me, said, "Back up. Let's try a different street." I threw the car into reverse and sped backward until we reached the last intersection. Turning left, we hoped this new direction would lead us somewhere safer. But almost immediately, we saw headlights up ahead. Another vehicle also parked sideways, blocking the entire road. This time, we didn't stop. Instead, I slowed down just enough to peer through the windshield. Was anyone inside? Could we squeeze past? Before we could decide, two men stepped out from the shadows beside the road. One carried what looked like a crowbar. "Oh crap," Sarah muttered under her breath. The men approached slowly, cautious. One stayed near the van, while the other moved toward my window. He motioned for me to roll it down. My hands trembled as I lowered it just a crack. "Where y'all headed?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. "The highway," I replied, trying to sound confident. He nodded, glancing over his shoulder at his partner. Then, without warning, he leaned closer to the window. His face was inches from mine, and I could smell cigarette smoke on his breath. "Y'all lost?" "Nope," I said quickly, "just taking a shortcut." He smirked before stepping back and signaling to his friend. The second guy walked over to the passenger side. Through the rearview mirror, I saw him grab the handle and yank on it. Thankfully, the doors were locked. That's when panic set in. Both men started pulling on the handles repeatedly, shouting for us to unlock the doors. Without thinking, I shifted into drive and floored it. Tires screeched as we lurched forward, narrowly missing the guy on my side. He stumbled backward, cursing loudly. We sped off, hearts pounding. None of us spoke for a solid minute. All I could hear was the sound of my own breathing and the hum of the engine. When we finally reached a busier road, relief washed over us. "Let's never take shortcuts again," Jake said, breaking the silence. "Agreed," I said, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "Never again." For the rest of the drive home, we replayed the scene in our heads, wondering how close we'd come to something much worse. By the time we got back to familiar territory, we were exhausted, but grateful. Grateful that we trusted each other, stuck together, and listened to our instincts. And yeah, maybe a little smarter too. I've been driving trucks for over a decade now, mostly hauling goods across state lines. It's not the most glamorous job, but it pays the bills and gets me out of bed every morning. Well, sometimes in the middle of the night if I'm on an overnight haul. My usual route involved delivering frozen food products to grocery chains scattered across several states. Most days were routine, 3 or 4 stops before heading back to the warehouse, then home. But every once in a while, there'd be one of those long-haul trips where distance dictated you couldn't make it back in a single day. That particular Thursday started like any other. The sky was still dark when I loaded up my trailer with pallets of frozen chicken tenders and waffles. By sunrise, I was already halfway through my first delivery. Everything went smoothly until late that evening, around 11 p.m., when I finished unloading at a small supermarket tucked away in some rural town. Normally, I'd push through and head straight home after dropping off my last load, no matter how tired I felt. But this time, I knew better. Driving all the way back without resting wasn't worth the risk, not with nearly 200 miles ahead of me. So as I merged onto the highway, I decided to pull over at the next truck stop to catch a few hours of sleep. There's something about being alone on the road late at night that makes your mind wander. Maybe it's the endless stretch of pavement lit only by your headlights, or the eerie silence broken only by the hum of the engine. Whatever it is, it can make you feel very calm and almost hypnotized. And that's exactly what happened as I cruised along, scanning the horizon for signs of civilization. It was somewhere between mile markers 45 and 50 when I noticed it, a flicker in my side mirror. I thought it was just another truck passing me from behind, probably trying to get ahead before merging lanes. But when I glanced over, I saw headlights glowing brightly right behind my trailer. Oddly enough, though, I couldn't see the actual vehicle. No hood, no windshield, nothing. Just lights floating eerily close to my rear bumper. Anyone who drives a big rig knows that having someone tailgating you is dangerous, especially at night. If I had to slam on the brakes for any reason, that driver would crash right into me. Still, I figured they'd pass eventually. People always do. But minutes ticked by and the light stayed fixed in place, hovering just inches from my blind spot. By now, irritation had turned to unease. What kind of idiot follows so closely without overtaking? Was their high beams malfunctioning, making them harder to spot? Or maybe they were drunk. Either way, I didn't want trouble. The sign for the upcoming truck stop loomed ahead, only 10 miles to go. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, glancing repeatedly at the mirror, willing the mysterious car to disappear. Finally, the exit ramp appeared and I signaled to turn off. As I slowed down, I caught movement in the mirror again. To my disbelief, the car slowed too, following me onto the ramp. Now I was certain they weren't just another sleepy driver. They were carefully trailing me. The parking lot was dimly lit, filled with rows of semis parked bumper to bumper. I scanned the area quickly, looking for an open spot near the building. The sooner I could park and lock myself inside the cab, the safer I'd feel. Finding a space, I eased the truck into position and shifted into park. Through the mirror, I watched as the car crept behind me, stopping unnervingly close to my trailer. Its headlights remained on. For a moment, I considered staying put, but curiosity got the better of me. Who were they, and why were they following me? Grabbing my flashlight, I stepped out of the cab, shutting the door firmly behind me. The cold night air hit me instantly, raising goosebumps on my arms. I walked cautiously toward the rear of the trailer, shining the light around to inspect the scene. As soon as the beam of my flashlight touched the front grille of the car, its engine roared to life. Tires squealed against asphalt as the vehicle reversed sharply, kicking up gravel before speeding away. In the brief flash of light, I managed to catch a glimpse of the driver, an older man with sunken eyes and weathered features. His car was old, rusted, and dented, resembling something you might find abandoned in a junkyard. For a split second, I wondered if he'd mistaken me for someone else. Maybe he thought I owed him money or had wronged him somehow. Shaken but determined to stay calm, I circled the truck, checking for damage or anything unusual. Everything seemed intact. Satisfied, I climbed back into the cab, locking both doors securely. Leaning back in my seat, I exhaled slowly, trying to shake off the encounter. Sleep wouldn't come easily tonight, but I needed rest. Closing my eyes, I forced myself to focus on the rhythmic hum of the idling engine. 2 hours passed, or so my watch told me, when a loud bang jolted me awake. Startled, I sat upright, heart pounding. Another bang, louder this time, echoed through the trailer. Someone was outside. Instinctively, I reached for the small utility knife I kept stashed beneath the dashboard. Every seasoned trucker carries some form of protection. You never know what or who you might run into on the road. Clutching the blade tightly, I peered into the side mirror. Shadows moving faintly near the rear of the truck, distorted by the dim glow of the parking lot lights. Quietly, I opened the driver's door, careful not to let it creak. Stepping out, I crouched low, straining to see under the trailer. Sure enough, a figure stood hunched over by the back doors, fiddling with something metallic. Behind them sat the same rusted car, its headlights switched off. My heart beating faster. "Hey!" I shouted, voice cracking despite my effort to sound confident. "What are you doing?" The man froze, then bolted toward the car. Within seconds, they were speeding off, tires screeching as they disappeared into the night. Breathing heavily, I approached the trailer doors. Up close, the truth became clear. Whoever it was had been attempting to break in. Scratches damaged the lock, and scratch marks gouged the metal frame. They hadn't succeeded, thankfully, but the attempt left me shocked. After ensuring everything was secure, I returned to the cab, double-checking all locks and windows. Sleep was out of the question now. Instead, I fired up the engine and pulled back onto the highway, eager to put as much distance between myself and that strange truck stop as possible. Nothing else happened during the remainder of the trip. When I finally arrived home, exhausted but relieved, I recounted the incident to a buddy of mine who also drove trucks. He listened intently, nodding occasionally. "Sounds like you ran into a scavenger," he said grimly. "They prey on rigs they think are full of valuable cargo." To this day, whenever I'm on the road and notice someone riding too close behind me, that same knot forms in my stomach. And honestly, that's the hardest part of the job. I worked as a delivery driver for a small sandwich shop during my college years. It wasn't a fancy job, but it covered the expenses and gave me flexibility to study when things were slow. Most nights were just dropping off food to tired parents or hungry college students, but one particular night stands out in my memory. To this day, I still can't fully explain what happened. It was late on a Friday evening, around 11:30 p.m., and the shop was winding down. We are usually closed at midnight, so we only had about half an hour left before last call. My coworker, Mike, handled the sandwiches while I took care of deliveries. Like most shifts, we split responsibilities depending on who was busiest. Mike was older than me, maybe mid-30s, quiet, and always focused on his work. He didn't talk much unless he had to, which suited me fine since I preferred keeping to myself too. The phone rang just as I walked back into the shop after finishing a delivery. Mike was busy assembling someone's order, so I picked up the receiver. A man's voice came through, slurred and hesitant, asking for a foot-long roast beef sub with extra cheese. His tone sounded off. Not angry, not impatient, just strange, like he was distracted or maybe drunk. I asked if he wanted anything else, chips, drinks, and he mumbled something unintelligible before settling on just the sandwich. "Got it," I said, writing down the address. "Be there soon." After hanging up, I glanced over at Mike, who was already working on the guy's sub. He caught my eye briefly and gave me this odd look, a mix of concern and curiosity, but didn't say anything. At the time, I brushed it off. Mike was always giving those kinds of looks. They rarely meant anything important. Once the sandwich was ready, I grabbed it from the counter and headed out to my car. The address was about 20 minutes away, deep in a part of town I didn't visit often. It wasn't exactly dangerous, but it felt isolated, with long stretches of empty fields and clusters of trees separating scattered houses. By the time I arrived, it was nearly midnight. The house itself looked ordinary, a single-story ranch-style home with peeling paint and a sagging front porch. What struck me, though, was how dark it seemed. There were no lights on inside except for a faint glow coming from what appeared to be the living room window. I parked in the driveway and stepped out, grabbing the bag with the sandwich. As I approached the porch, I noticed the absence of any cars besides mine. That was weird. Maybe the guy walked home, or perhaps he used a rideshare service. Before I could knock, the door swung open abruptly. Standing there was a middle-aged man wearing sweatpants and a stained t-shirt, his hair messy, and his eyes darted around nervously, avoiding direct contact with me. When he saw me holding the bag, he froze for a second, looking genuinely startled, as if he hadn't expected anyone to show up. "You're here," he muttered under his breath, almost to himself. "Yeah," I replied, trying to sound casual despite feeling uneasy. "That'll be $12.50. He fumbled with his wallet, pulling out crumpled bills and handing them to me without counting. Still silent, he took the sandwich and stepped aside, gesturing for me to come in. Normally, I wouldn't enter a customer's house, it's against company policy, but something about his attitude made me hesitate. Was he inviting me in because he needed help, or was it something else entirely? "No thanks," I said quickly, backing toward the steps. "Have a good night." Instead of responding, he stared past me, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm. Following his gaze, I turned around slowly. About 10 feet away, near the edge of the driveway, stood a figure cloaked in shadows. They wore a hoodie pulled low over their face, obscuring any features. They weren't moving, just standing there silently, watching us. Who was this person? Were they waiting for the guy inside? For me? I glanced back at the customer, hoping for some kind of explanation, but he slammed the door shut without another word, leaving me alone outside with the mysterious figure. For a moment, I stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. Then the figure began walking, not toward me, but parallel to the house, disappearing into the darkness behind the property. Heart pounding, I sprinted to my car, threw the bag onto the passenger seat, and sped off as fast as I dared down the narrow road. On the drive back, I replayed the scene in my head, trying to make sense of it. Why had the customer acted so strangely? And who was that person lurking by the driveway? Had they been following him, or worse, following me? When I returned to the shop, Mike immediately noticed my shaken state. "What happened?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. I described the entire incident, the silent customer, the shadowy figure, the sudden retreat indoors. Mike listened intently, his face unreadable. When I finished, he sighed heavily and leaned against the counter. "That guy," he said finally. "He called earlier today too. Asked for me specifically." "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. "He said he knew me from somewhere, but I couldn't place him. Sounded kind of desperate, honestly. Kept insisting I deliver his order personally. I told him I couldn't leave the store, obviously." A chill ran down my spine. So the customer hadn't randomly chosen our shop, he'd targeted Mike. But why? And did the hooded figure have anything to do with it? Over the next hour, I debated whether to report the incident to the police. Eventually, I decided it was better to be safe than sorry. I called the non-emergency line and described everything. The customer, the figure, even Mike's connection to the situation. The officer promised to send someone to check it out and update me later. True to their word, I received a call about an hour later. According to the officer, the customer claimed he was simply waiting for a friend named Mike, whom he believed worked at the sandwich shop. When pressed about the hooded figure, however, he denied seeing anyone suspicious and insisted the whole thing must have been a misunderstanding. Despite the official explanation, I couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was going on. Why had the customer lied about knowing Mike? And what about the figure in the shadows? Their presence felt calculated. Had they been casing the area? Planning something bigger? Mike remained tight-lipped whenever I brought it up, brushing off my concerns with vague answers. "Probably nothing," he'd say. "Just some guy having a bad night." But I wasn't convinced. Something about the whole ordeal felt wrong, like pieces of a puzzle that refused to fit together. In the weeks that followed, I started picking up fewer shifts at the sandwich shop, eventually quitting altogether once school picked up again.